Smith with Ken Smith Gallery. Today is part 2 of our kingpin brake and shock absorber repair installation. And so if you haven't seen part 1 yet, be sure to click on the link in the description. I'll also post it at the end of this video so that you can see part 1. We're going to go ahead and do part 2. And we're going to start assembling the car back together. I've got my cup of coffee with me, and it's a beautiful morning here in East Tennessee. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So grab a cup of coffee or your favorite drink, and let's begin.
You can kind of see here where the ball has really been worn. Let's see, there's a good angle of it. Right there, definitely needed to be replaced. Look at how worn that was. Over time, whoever previously owned this really didn't do a good job lubricating it. You can kind of see just how badly worn this is, and I definitely wanted to take care of that. The others weren't as bad, but I just really didn't want to risk anything. And so we obviously are going to go ahead and replace this with the new ones that we have right over here.
So I have already gone ahead and removed the old bushings, put the new bushings in. There's plenty of videos out there showing that how to do that, and so I'm not going to repeat all that information. It's pretty straightforward, quite honestly. But one of the things that I did want to share with you is the importance of making sure that after you ream these, that you make sure that the passages are clean. And so this one here, where the steering knuckle kind of attaches to the tie rod arms, it's really hard to make sure that you get in there. And so I actually used a toothpick, or not a toothpick, kind of a Q-tip, and you can either get in there and just kind of wiggle it around, just like you see right there. You can see all of that old grease that I pulled out, and I guarantee you that not only is that there's grease in there, but there'll be metal filings in there from you reaming this out. So again, super important that you do that. I'll probably go ahead and do this multiple times until that comes out absolutely spotless, and then I'll shoot a little bit of brake cleaner in there. With this grease fitting and this grease fitting, shoot some grease in there and then clean it out, and it will amaze you the amount of metal shavings that you'll see in there. And that'll, honestly, if you don't get all those metal shavings out of there, that's going to prematurely wear out the new bushings that you put in. The other thing I wanted to point out is, no matter how hard I tried, there's 93 years worth of rust there, and I just couldn't get these out. So I made sure that they were nice and clean. They do work, they do function. I'm probably going to try to figure out some way of capping these off just to keep them clean. Haven't quite figured that out yet, but the first thought that came to mind was small vacuum tube caps, and that might be just all I need to just kind of fit over there. Not sure, but that's an option. I'm gonna give it a try. Okay, now that I got all the grease fittings cleaned out and whatnot, I'll give you a couple of tips on how I'm gonna go ahead and paint this. I took the old kingpins, as you can see, and just inserted them in the bearings, so that protects the bearings from getting any paint or debris in them. And for the grease fittings, as you can see, I used paper clips. That'll keep the holes plugged, which is also another little quick tip. Great way of cleaning out that grease fitting too, which I ended up doing. But this will help in the painting process. I don't have to worry about paint getting in the new bushings or in the grease fittings, and just keeps everything nice and clean. So here we go. And we'll do that a couple of times just to give it a nice coat of paint. And the first thing we want to do is kind of get that felt washer in there, like so. Just kind of set her down there, slide that spindle on, and just kind of stick my finger in there and make sure I'm kind of lined up with that hole. All right, now we got our felt washer in, and we've pre-lubed the kingpin bushings, put a little grease on our kingpin as well. I also made sure that the bearing is packed, and what I did was checked everything before lubing it all up, making sure that we had enough spacers so that when we install the kingpin in final assembly, this is resting completely, the car weight is resting completely on that bearing. You want that, you want to make sure that there we go, she's all the way down, and you want to make sure that the weight of the car rests solely on this bearing. Otherwise, you're going to wear everything out way too fast. I make sure there's no binding. That feels really good. We're kind of tapped down in there. You remember how loose the old one was, and we don't have that problem. So next we're going to put in the, I'm not too sure what it's called, but I think the brake actuator doohickey jiggy. We'll grab that. I went ahead and shot grease all the way through this. Made sure that I had grease coming out of both ends. I put a little grease on here. We got some grease in here already, and we'll just kind of turn that a little bit so that we can get her kind of lined in. This should be facing about 15 degrees forward. When we go ahead and get that in, there we go. That's nice. And if you're unsure if you've got this in correctly, you can take the old brake rod pin, this is the old one actually, just kind of insert it up in there and just move this really quick and make sure that brake rod is moving up and down. Okay, so we got that in the right location. Yep, I think that's just going to be just fine. So we'll go ahead and get our nut on here next. So now that we have this all loose fit, we're going to go ahead and drive our pin in next. And you want to make sure, I just kind of feel inside here real quick. Make sure that, one, I don't have anything in there. And I take a peek and just make sure that I see the cut. Going to slide our kingpin locking bolt so that we've got it lined up with that cut. And give her a good tap. so that she's all the way in. That feels good. Now we're going to go ahead and put our lock nut and washer on the back end of this. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up. We can see that pin is going in there really nice. Still drawing it in. All right. That looks pretty good. I'll probably touch this up with a little black paint afterwards. Feels real good. I'm pretty happy with that. Next, we'll go ahead and get this all tightened up. All right, we can get that nut on and get that all tightened up. And then that will kind of snug up the brake actuator rod, if that's what it's called. I'm not really too sure. Brake actuator doodad, brake actuator thingamajig, whatchamacallit. Again, that all feels really good. No binding. Next, we're going to go ahead and install the spindle steering knuckle. And as a sidebar, if you see a bunch of hair like that, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I've got a golden retriever and she is shedding like crazy. And so I'm literally having to double check and triple check and quadruple check everything that I'm putting together. Yeah, crazy. Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and get our steering knuckle installed next, or whatever that thing's called. Steering arm, steering knuckle. Our steering knuckle arm installed. I'm gonna go ahead and put this little doodad on. This one's kind of a pistol to get at, so I'll end up using a I don't have a socket or a wrench big enough, so I'll end up using my crescent wrench to tighten that up. You want to make sure you get the cotter pins in right away so you don't end up forgetting later. I'm going to go ahead and start putting the brake backing plate on next, and just kind of work my way towards the front of the car. I'm going to hook up the steering knuckles last, and the only reason why I want to hook up the steering knuckles last is right now it just makes it really easy for me to rotate, and it'll be the same on the other side as well. So just my own preference, that's all. Now the felt washer, if you were looking at the back side of the backing plate, The spindle's here, and the kingpin is kind of coming down this way. I'm going to take this socket, and we'll pretend it's the kingpin. You can see how the felt washer goes in between the backing plate and the kingpin so that the actuating rod travels up and down in the spindle. So I kind of did this because it's really hard to see exactly where this felt washer goes. And it's a very tight fit. I mean, if you look, you can see how I just can compress this really quick. So this is kind of hard to actually put in. Now, I've read all sorts of things where online some guys have cut this down to trim and fit it. That's a possibility. Other guys have actually put the backing plate on and then pushed the felt through the hole with a small blunt object and kind of push it through the hole and kind of get it around the kingpin. I suppose that could be another possibility. For me, what I ended up doing is I actually put some grease on this and then compressed it, pushed it up against the kingpin, and then the grease kind of held it like glue, kind of, sort of. So it kind of held it in place long enough for me to get the backing plate and finagle it around. And I kept the brake rod in there just long enough to kind of hold everything in place. And that's how I kind of got the backing plate on. It was really kind of tricky to film it that way. And it took several times to do it. By the time I figured out how to do it, I actually didn't film it. But I wanted to show you just a couple of different options that you could do, and I think setting it up on my little makeshift workbench might give you a little easier view and a perspective that I wouldn't have been able to photograph otherwise. You know, as you were obviously aware, they have holes for cotter pins, so you may want to kind of think about where you're putting them before you get them too tight so that you can get the cotter pin in later. I'm going to turn this way and just kind of hand start things up. A little bit easier for me. Maybe you can see something. The original wedge or adjusting, this is a self-centering one. This is kind of an aftermarket one. You can kind of see where the original would sit in pretty tight for the most part. It's not really going to move around. So when the pin pushes this down, the wheels on the brake shoe, they kind of push out on both sides. I decided to go with the equalizing wedge, which is this right here. Supposedly this is supposed to really help with the brakes. And I don't see any harm in that, but you can kind of see how that movement goes around. You definitely want to make sure that if you're going to use the old wedge that there's no wear. I got this all cleaned up pretty good. Didn't see any noticeable wear on it, and so decided I'm just going to go ahead and use the old one. So yeah. So I'm just going to throw the wedge back in here, drop the pin down just to get kind of a loose fit, put the castle nut on the back side, again, just to kind of hand tighten things up. And once I get it hand tight, I'm just going to kind of check the movement here. I'm going to push that wedge up, check to make sure that everything's kind of moving nice. I'm going to double check the book. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to put any kind of lubricant in there. If I am, then I'll just take that off and put some lubricant in there. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it like that and go on to the next step. Now, I am probably going to enter a very controversial statement or subject matter right here, but let me just defend myself. You're welcome to have your opinion. I'm not going to say that you can't have your opinion and your opinion is right or wrong. I'm just going to tell you based on literally hundreds, if not thousands, of brake shoes that I have installed over the years on other cars other than a Model A. These are not pre-arched, okay? And let me tell you why. One, where I live, there isn't a pre-arching machine probably within 150, 200 miles of me. So I'm not going to go chase one down. I had these shoes relined, and what I'm looking for is fit. I don't see the brake shoe wobbling around inside. You see how when I go ahead and press that in, I don't see the brake shoe wobbling around. Okay, I mean, it just isn't. When I put the brake shoe in and I grab the ends, the corners around, just kind of move, that brake shoe's not moving around. It's not cattywampus, it's not lopsided, and I'm not about to file 10,000 miles worth of brake lining off here to get a perfect fit. I guarantee you these brake shoes are going to burnish themselves in if they're installed properly and adjusted properly. Now, you might have your opinion. You might have what you believe are facts to be true. Please don't be a keyboard warrior. I'm not asking to get into a big old flame here on YouTube. Find another subject to get into an argument about. These were modern linings. I had them bonded, as you can see. Let's see if we can get a little better light on there. They've been bonded on here as well as riveted on here. So this is modern linings that I had installed at a company that does a lot of clutch manufacturing here, and you saw that in the first video. They do a lot of farm equipment as well. So I've went ahead and pre-assembled everything. We're going to go ahead and start getting it on the backing plate now. Alrighty, so I'm going to try and install these brake shoes in a way that hopefully that you can see. Now, I'm going to do it in a way that I found to be the easiest, at least for me. Again, your mileage may vary, but I actually like to try to put the pin in first, and I got a little bit of grease in that hole just to based on the instructions that I read. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of put the shoe in there, latch the spring on, like you see. I got a little bit of grease there. This will kind of help hold the shoe in while I get the next shoe in. Like so. Okay, now I'm just going to kind of bring the shoe over, hook up the spring, lay it on top of the rollers, and at this juncture I've got some tension here holding everything together. Okay, that's the way I found it to be the easiest to getting the brake shoes on. You know, in your more modern cars you've got hold down springs that hold the brake shoes in place, but obviously we don't have that here. So at this juncture, the next thing I do is I just make sure that I've got the rollers in place where everything needs to be. Everything seems to be functioning like it should.
Alrighty, so the bottom springs are installed. Nothing fancy to see there, so I didn't want to waste time with you watching me put them on. What I do want to show you is that here I am checking the assembly, just making sure that everything seems to be working just fine. Looks like the rollers are moving, and I can see all 4 rollers moving. And yeah, so it looks good. Everything is lightly lubricated. If it's metal to metal somewhere, I've got just a little bit of grease, kind of like I do the kind of dating myself here, but you know, Brill cream, a little dab will do you. You really just need just a little bit of grease. So after getting everything assembled, I ended up putting the drum on, and I want to talk a little bit about what the book says to do and what I'm opting to do. Now, again, your mileage may vary. Please don't be a keyboard warrior. I'm happy if you want to leave a positive comment. If you just want to be negative, please not here. At any rate, the book says to use the centering tool. It gives specific dimensions for top and bottom in relationship to the drum. I get that. I understand that. I honestly just didn't want to buy a centering tool. And so I'm electing to do this similar to the way I've done many a drum brake on more modern cars. And so what I plan on doing, and what I've actually done, is I put the drum on without packing the wheel bearings. Just put the drum on, put the bearings in, put a preload on like I normally would, spin the drum, and click the adjuster back here until I hear slight tension on that. I believe that with the equalizing cam that is down here for the wedge, I believe that that's going to be sufficient enough to give me good brake stopping. And so that's the way I plan on doing it. I put the shoes in the drum that you saw earlier just to make sure that they fit really good. Again, no one around by me has the ability to be able to arc shoes. I don't really want to spend several $100s for pre-assembled backing plates, rebuilt backing plates. I'm not going to do that. And so this is the option that I've decided to do. And I'm certainly going to report to you on how I feel the car stops. And I'm sure you're going to be anxious to know. But again, I'm not discrediting. If you want to have your shoes pre-arced and you want to use the centering tool, by all means, go ahead and do that. I'm not saying that that's any of that information is incorrect. I'm just telling you how I chose to do mine. Okay, so with the brake drum on, and again, just enough bearing preload. The bearings are still somewhat dry. I haven't really repacked them yet. I've gone ahead and adjusted. I had when I assembled this, the adjusting wedge or adjusting cam, adjusting lever, not really too sure what it's called, was backed all the way in. And so I went ahead multiple times, just kept working the adjustment back and forth until I got some drag. And I feel like at this juncture, one click back gives me a good starting point. I should be able to slide the drum off without any difficulty. Well, actually, before I do that, my lever back here is about 15 degrees forward. If I pull the lever back, you can just ever so slightly. I've already got the brakes activating. You can kind of see that. And that's just before high noon. And again, just all hand spinning it. But let's take a look inside
and just see how things seem to still be functioning. And if I press down on the brake lever, the shoes should be coming out evenly. And they are. I'm looking at the rollers, they are moving. That's good. I think we're good. And so we're going to do the same thing now to the other side.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this video. This is part 2 of a 3-part series of installing kingpins and installing Ken Davis shock absorbers, installing front brakes, installing or rebuilding the tie rod ends and setting the toe, and then taking her out for a test drive. Now obviously we've already got it back together because we've already done that, and so you're going to be really surprised to see how everything formulates. Now if you haven't seen part 1, make sure that you click on that video link right over there. Yeah, there. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Click on that link right over there. And most of all, y'all be blessed.